This is The Sports Life.
Rebound to Trey White. Jonas to Humrick House for three. He got it, and the Illini have the lead.
Bounce pass to a cutting Richardson. There's a slam for you.
Michigan trying to pressure, and a beautiful backdoor cut by Richardson.
And now MSU takes it away. Kohler, he slams it.
What a steal by Akins, and Michigan State absolutely dominant.
And welcome into the Sports Life. We'll team in here along with Dalton Shetler. Some exciting moments from Big Ten hoops. Well, the one thing about Illinois and Michigan State, when they get rolling, they are a lot of fun. No doubt about that. Well, this is a show we're going to be talking basketball. And one of the topics we're going to address is going to be Indiana basketball. The program, where's it heading? Is it still a good job? Things like that. And so that's going to be a pretty interesting conversation.
That sure will. We'll look forward to that one a little bit later on. Also, Ohio State was really squarely on that bubble heading into the week, and then they dropped to Iowa in the first game of the Big Ten tournament. Looks like the bubble's burst. We'll see what's going on with Buckeye basketball as we'll be joined by Adam Jardy later on. And how about UCLA women's basketball winning the Big Ten tournament this past week? And this is a season unlike many others for UCLA. Sure, they've had some success, but maybe to this height, this could be a new chapter of Bruin basketball. We'll be catching up with the voice of UCLA women's basketball, Dave Marcus, about it.
Okay, sounds of the week. What do we got?
Well, I think we've got to go to the events that happened in East Lansing. Not the win for Michigan State, but where the senior day tradition, the kiss, became the shove there at the Breslin Center. Michigan head coach Dusty May talked about this afterwards during his weekly press conference at the beginning of this week.
Number one, do I know the customs and traditions of any other Big Ten school? No, I don't, and won't know until I experience it. I don't watch Michigan State documentaries. I don't have a Sparty foam finger growing up, so I have no idea what they do. I know this, that the officials walked over and said that they have a tradition on senior night where their players kiss the logo as they're coming out of the floor. It's going to take some time. Great. That's awesome. These seniors deserve it. And on top of that, these guys earned a Big Ten championship. I have a lot of respect for what that team did this year. 17-3 in this league and battling the way they battled, I have a lot of respect for what that team did. Now, as far as what happened after that, from my perspective, I'm standing on the sideline. And keep in mind, Cohen Carr had just gotten a layup a couple minutes before on the last free throw. They missed a free throw. He sprints past us. They advance it. And so we had talked about being more alert on free throws. And so I think it's Pippins at the line, LJ and Fatter at half court. I think Frankie Fiddler comes out of the game, kisses the floor, hugs his teammates. This is a little bit fuzzy. This is all just off memory. This wasn't on the TV copy. No issues whatsoever. Kisses the floor, goes out, does his thing. I think maybe they're subbing in for another senior at that point, and our guys, Fat and LJ, are standing at the exact spot they were when Fiddler kissed the floor, not doing anything other than just standing there. And then out of the blue, they're still standing at half court, and the Michigan State player comes up and two-hand shoves them in the chest. Now, the Spartan logo is about a third of the court. The game is going on. I didn't know that this happened like during the game. And so if we needed to back them up to the other end or put all of our guys on an offensive, I don't know what we were supposed to do in that situation. I know that we had two freshmen standing at half court, and they're respectful, great dudes. And obviously, like I said, this was not the first person that came out and kissed the floor. We'd already agreed to the officials and whatnot. And so, yeah, that's my perspective on it. I'm very proud that our guys didn't retaliate in a different manner that could cost them playing in the Big Ten tournament. To have that self-restraint and self-discipline and realizing that they're representing Michigan the way they do. So I was very proud of that moment because that could have gotten really, really ugly. Next year, I'd like to have the lead. Next year, I would say, hey, guys, move back 5 feet. I mean, once again, like, this is competition, man. We're playing a game, and our guys are standing at half court. Like, and once again, it wasn't as if Frankie Fiddler's coming out of the game, and it was just something happened during that. And this is a long period. You guys have the time. It is 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. They never moved. A player had already done it. So I mean, what I would tell them differently, like, keep your antennas up for whatever that behavior was. I'd ask them, hey, guys, move back 10 feet on defense because they're so fast in transition. I'm giving them credit for that as well. That's never popped up in my, what do you call it, queue. It's never popped up in my queue if it's Netflix or Prime or whatever the case. So, but once again, I don't think it was a big deal either. I mean, like I said, I was just proud of our guys to show the restraint that they did and not make it an issue that could cost them playing in the Big Ten tournament.
Dusty May, the head basketball coach at the University of Michigan. And I would say on the other side of this, having witnessed it, I can understand how Dusty may not understand what was about to happen. I'm shocked he doesn't have his Sparty finger. He doesn't have one of those.
It's interesting. And of course, as part of the counter, we actually have the other side and head coach Tom Izzo. And during his radio show, he talked a little bit about Trey Holloman, who was the player who confronted the two Wolverines at half court, to put it politely, about trying to protect the senior day tradition. Here's what Tom Izzo had to say and his perspective on it all.
In this case, I did not see what happened at the beginning, but I've never seen him that upset. And probably some of it is my fault, because I speak morning, noon, and night about the players before them. Not my players. You know, I've been there a lot. There are players, Wavy, Johnny Green. I talk about all of them, because I think it's really important that you honor the people that built the place that you're now renting. You know, somebody had to build the foundation. And there were so many people before them that did. And I think my guys do take that to heart. And, I didn't like the way it all happened. And do I wish he wouldn't have pushed them? Yeah. Do I blame him? After watching the film and seeing what I saw, hell no. But there's so much that goes into it, so many things happened 30 years ago. That's the problem with being at one school a long time. If I wouldn't have been back here when people did things, I would never, ever do anything on somebody else's court. They asked us if we wanted to bring the trophy in case we beat Iowa. And we wanted hats and things to celebrate. Some places, when we won the championship in the last game, they said, do you want a ladder to cut down the nets, And it was hell no, hell no, hell no. I would never do that in somebody else's arena, and I would never. Well, we've had a few issues here in football and in basketball, and I don't hold that against anybody, but what we do is what we do. And I want to make sure everybody understands this. That was not to rub it in anybody's nose. We don't do that for the Michigan game. We don't do that for games we win. We do that no matter who we play. If it's the last game of the year, I will never change that. Never. We lose every game on senior night. It's not going to change because it is who we are, it is what we are, and is what is expected here. So it was a shame that it got to that, but Trey is, for a skinny little guy, he's played football, he's got a little toughness to him, and I don't think he was sticking up for anything except the 300 players that played here before him, and God bless him for that.
Some of the thoughts of the dean of all the Big Ten basketball coaches, Tom Izzo, the head man of Michigan State. Well, Dalton, interesting. Dusty May's take, Tom Izzo's take on the same incident.
Well, in this rivalry, it's never lacked spice, but it feels like it just got another truckload of jalapeno peppers dumped into this thing. And look, I mean, you heard Tom Izzo talk about football, men's basketball, all the different sports. There have been countless memories of tension building between these two schools. And now with a new face as the leader of Michigan men's basketball, it appears we're still going to have a pretty good rivalry worth tuning into each time.
Oh, yeah, and yes, and one of the things that makes it good is both teams are going to be good.
Yep.
And that's always the key to this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, I've seen a lot of these senior days, and I've never seen anything like that, ever. So with that, we're going to take a break. Up next, a little chat about Indiana basketball in just a moment.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Dad. Did you get a new haircut or something? A new shirt? You're looking good.
What happened?
a little fender bender.
How little?
A few days in the shop little. But thanks to Mom and our agent, we've already submitted a claim and can track the status right from the app. Auto Owners pays what they owe without any hassle.
Sounds like simple human sense.
I'm fine, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask.
Ask your independent agent if Auto Owners makes sense for you.
Every kid deserves a chance to feel safe, to have their own bed, to be loved and cared for. That's why I love my foster parents. They make me feel like part of the family.
Raise hope and foster dreams for one of 13,000 Michigan children in foster care. Visit michigan.gov/hope for a home or call 855-MICH-KIDS. That's 855-MICH-KIDS. Sponsored by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and the Michigan Association of Broadcasters.
Do you hear that? That's the sound of uncertainty lurking under your hood. You know the feeling. I know I do. That sudden sinking sensation when you see a check engine light or your car unexpectedly breaks down and you're faced with sky-high repair bills. It's time to shield against unexpected repairs with CarShield. CarShield is America's most trusted auto protection company and has an A rating with the Better Business Bureau. Don't let the fear of a breakdown keep you up at night. Trust the Shield, CarShield, and say goodbye to terrifying repair bills and hello to peace of mind. Your plan also comes with 24/7 roadside assistance, courtesy towing, rental car options, and so much more. Don't wait till it's too late. Call CarShield now before a breakdown. Protect your wallet. Protect your car with CarShield. Get our best protection ever. Call now. You'll thank me later. 800-965-1292. 800-965-1292. That's 800-965-1292.
We'll be back with more in a moment. This is The Sports Life.
Roxanne Watson is on a mission.
Hello, how are you doing today?
She wants more people to register as organ, eye, and tissue donors.
Are you an organ donor?
Yes, I am.
Yay. My goal is to sign up the most people in the United States.
What drives her? Roxanne's own life was saved through the gift of a heart transplant, made possible by an organ donor.
I decided that day that I was going to devote myself to the cause of organ donation and signing people up and honoring my donor by doing that.
Now she's back to health, and she's a powerful force helping to save lives every day through her work. Imagine what you can make possible by leaving behind the gift of life.
8 people can be helped with the major organs, and up to 50 people can be helped with a little bit of everything. And when you think about it that way, that you could help that many people, it's amazing. It really is.
Learn more and sign up as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. Go to organdonor.gov. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Health Resources and Services Administration.
And welcome back for more of the Sports Life. Will Tiemann here along with Dalton Shetler. Well, when you talk basketball collegiately, somehow the conversation gets back to Indiana. Whether it's Bobby Knight or national championships or whatever. But this year was not about those sorts of things. It was about turmoil. It was about not winning enough, and should there be a coaching change. Well, to talk about that a little bit today with us is a guy who covers it all the time. That's Zach Osterman from the Indianapolis Star. And Zach, thanks for joining us. And I guess I just wanted to start off our conversation by asking you about how was it this year? I mean, Mike Woodson, the head coach, a favorite son, great player, all those things, and it just didn't go right.
No, and I think there was a feeling, listen, you don't want to judge anybody just purely based on their NIL number, but there was such a sort of redoubled investment in the resources Indiana made available for roster building after last season, because I think everyone was frustrated with the way last season went and just kind of how badly Indiana sort of slumped away from the NCAA tournament. They finished 10-10 in the Big Ten, and they still weren't even anywhere near the bubble. And Indiana wound up, going out and competing for, and you don't want to go nuts about rankings, but for some of the highest ranked transfers, in the portal, guys like Umar Ballo and Miles Rice. And, I think concurrently Indiana was able to keep hold of Trey Galloway, of Malik Renew, of Mackenzie Mbako. And I think there was justifiable sort of optimism and hope around, this season. And it just kind of went sour about as quickly as it could. You know, they had a really promising win in an exhibition game at Tennessee, but then they go to battle for Atlantis. They get blown out. They lose by 28, I think 28 or 29. I don't have the schedule right in front of me. Against Louisville in the first game, they give up 50-plus points in the first half of a 16-point loss against Gonzaga. In the second game, there's a 17-point loss at Nebraska in December. And then back-to-back, I think probably the if you want to say sort of the crisis point of the season, was back-to-back 25-point losses at Iowa and then at home against Illinois in mid-January. And I think from that point forward, it felt like kind of whatever else happened in the season, that there was a lack of belief in the long-term direction, it sort of connected to the status quo and Mike Woodson's tenure. And obviously we can debate the merits of that, but I think one way or the other, it kind of settled in from there. And Indiana's actually played, I would argue, better basketball in the weeks since. But, I think we all know, too, sometimes when something sort of feels like it's gotten baked into the cake a little bit, it's hard to get that taste out.
And I think it'd be interesting to talk about the pivot, the positive pivot Indiana's had late in its season. But if we go back to what you just were kind of outlining, Mike Woodson was able to get some of the big fish in the transfer portal. Umar Ballo comes in. Miles Rice comes in. You get Malik Renew. You get Mackenzie Mbako. So if there's talent and you're kind of troubleshooting the Indiana program, what was the issue? What has went wrong in Mike Woodson's time there in Bloomington?
I mean, again, I think you separate it because it's worth saying, to Indiana's credit, that they've only lost by double digits once, since the ugliness of those games in November, December, January. But if you go back to those blowout losses, there were some consistent themes. Indiana would just kind of go through periods of defensive collapse, really struggling on the boards. If you want to look at kind of one of the things that maybe has turned this team and this season around a little bit, it's actually this team's ability to rebound the basketball more effectively. I think a general sort of listlessness that there would be pronounced stretches in games where Indiana just looked overwhelmed, and I don't think this is unfair to say, Indiana just looked, kind of devoid of ideas, devoid of confidence. Mike Woodson would switch lineups. He'd rotate to his bench. He'd bring starters back in, whatever, and nothing would make a difference. And Indiana would just get, like I said, completely overwhelmed. That Nebraska game, for example, I think Indiana was down 1 with about 7 minutes left, and they wind up losing by 17. And, there were just too many of those moments. And, again, this kind of goes back to last season, too, when some of that stuff when some of those moments were maybe too common and Indiana really couldn't get away from those weaknesses. Eventually they did, at least to a meaningful enough degree, to play their way back into NCAA tournament contention this season. But I don't think you feel like Indiana's ever really left, some of that fragility behind. And there were lineup concerns, 2 big lineups at times not working, 3-point shooting still an issue, et cetera. But the one kind of common denominator was just, as you watched it with your own eyes, Indiana just looked, would go through these games where there were periods in games when Indiana just looked completely overwhelmed. And let's be fair, we're talking about a team that's on the bubble now, maybe even on the right side of the bubble going into conference tournament weekends. But, I mean, that's a relatively new development. Indiana spent most of this winter comfortably outside the NCAA tournament, and that was why.
Don't you think, Zach, in some regards, the pressure's off now, right? Coaches made a decision. The fans are back at the Assembly Hall cheering, not booing. And it's almost like the cloud is gone, and maybe they're beginning to play now like everybody thought they might have played earlier.
I think to some extent, I think that's probably fair, at least to a point. Again, if you think back to when Mike Woodson made that decision and when he decided to step away, that was before the Michigan game. Indiana lost that game. It lost a couple games with kind of some ugly late game execution right before that. The game at Purdue, when Indiana's, certainly I think at least needed to work for a higher quality offensive possession down one inside the final minute. The game at home against Maryland when Indiana's up 4 with 22 seconds left and still conspires to lose that game. But, it's not like the skid just sort of completely arrested itself right after Mike Woodson announced it. If anything, I think some of Indiana's improvement probably was starting to shine through before he announced, and the results really didn't start kind of, I guess, piling up until a little while after he announced, his decision. They lost a couple games, right after he announced his intention to step down at the end of the season, before they picked up that big win at Michigan State that has kind of anchored their resume since. I do think what is probably fair to say is that this team doesn't have to feel burdened, whether it's by the weight of preseason expectations or by any sort of, again, I'm not sure these criticisms are always completely fair, but criticisms that were being leveled about, the cost of the roster and how much money had been invested and so forth. I think this team is probably free. I think this coach and this staff are probably a little bit free from, sort of feeling like they have to serve anything other than the season right in front of them. You don't have to think about, how's this going to affect this player's development down the line, or will it be harder to keep him in Bloomington if we don't do this? And I think that's one reason why you've seen Mike Woodson just pivot to such senior-heavy lineups in the last few weeks and just kind of say, listen, if I'm going down with the guys that have been most consistent for me, have been my best leaders, have played the most basketball, and are the ones that I feel like I can count on most in crunch time. And that has been, I think primarily Trey Galloway, Luke Goody, Anthony Leal, to a certain extent Umar Ballo, and Malik Renew, kind of almost interchanging at times between which one of them just kind of had the hot hand in the game down in the paint. It's probably freed Woodson a little bit, maybe as much as it's freed his roster, if that makes sense. But I don't think that's the only thing that has, kind of yielded this late season turnaround.
Zach, we're running a little bit heavy on time, but both Will and I each have one question left for you. I'll start with mine, and given this situation, the forgotten son, or the one that got away, was Dusty Mays for so many Indiana fans to be the next guy. I've seen some comments where Indiana fans were hopeful of maybe like a Brad Stevens and going after the great whales that there are out there. Who really is in play for Indiana's next head coaching job?
Yeah, I don't listen. I would be surprised if Indiana didn't at least make a cursory phone call to Brad Stevens, right? But I don't think Indiana would have expected too much from that. I think you maybe call somebody like Brad Stevens as much to just pick their brain on the job and, who are some of the candidates you think are really thinking about the game and really sort of, front foot or innovative ways right now that you think we should be considering. Obviously, Dusty May, was always going to be a name mentioned next to this job, but I think him signing that extension at Michigan probably put that to rest. I think don't call this a prediction because I'm not prepared to make a prediction yet. I think the name that I do kind of keep circling back to has been McCollum at Drake, who's obviously, I think there's a temptation maybe from Indiana fans to see him as an obvious candidate because there's kind of some Kurt Signetti comparisons there. Spent a lot of time down in Division II, had a ton of success, won almost 400 games in 15 seasons, 4 national titles. This is his first year at Drake, but 30 wins, won the Valley regular season and conference tournament championships. I think this is the first 30-win season in Drake history, at least in Division I. Is he the only candidate? No, I doubt he is. I doubt he's the sole focus of what Indiana's working on right now. But if you kind of ask me, if you said like what's the one name that you feel like is maybe bubbling up more than all the others, that is probably the best answer I can give you.
Well, final question here, Zach. Is this Indiana job still a good job?
I actually think there are ways in which it's probably a better job now than it's been in a long time, and I think a lot of that is revenue share related. Indiana is obviously going to be one of the schools that pours, the largest share of its revenue, the largest chunk of its revenue sharing budget into basketball. The NIL number is still going to be very healthy no matter what the future looks like there. I think this is probably, and I think there's maybe an extent too, to which Indiana has kind of, I don't want to say broken off from its past, but has kind of, liberated itself a little bit from the shadow of all of what Bob Knight did, just because, frankly, it's been so long. And I mean, it's. I think there's almost an extent to which a lot of Indiana fans are just saying, listen, we're not concerned about doing it this way or that way, or paying homage to, this period in our history or that period in our history. It's just 23 years since the Final Four appearance, 38 years since the national championship. Indiana fans just want a winner. And I think they'll take that, whatever it looks like. If it's fast-paced, high octane, if it's slow and deliberate, if it's recruiting this way or that way, if it's the portal, if it's high school, whatever. They just, they want to feel like their program is on solid footing again. And so I think there are ways in which, listen, it will always be a job with a lot of pressure. And I think undeniably it is a job that has slipped in prestige in the last, let's say, 20 years or so. But I think that it's probably in some ways in better health than it's been in that same period of time, because of sort of the modern developments of roster building, roster management, and how to quantify the potential of a job by the resources that you're able to put into that job. And so I think, at the moment, Indiana is certainly not a blue blood, a top line job. I don't think anyone could argue that it is, but I think the possibility still exists for the job to be that for the right coach again. And that's what I think Indiana's trying to figure out who that is right now.
Well, Zach, as always, it's a fun chat, and we always learn a little bit. Hope to see you somewhere along the way in the tournament.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, as always.
Some really insightful conversation with Zach Osterman from the Indianapolis Star. Dalton, I loved his answer about why Indiana still could be a plum job. Speaking about good jobs and big programs, up next to look at Ohio State.
So, got one for you, boss.
Oh, yeah?
What's black, white, and dented all over?
I give up.
The company truck. I know, but thanks to our agent, we've already submitted an insurance claim and can track the status right from the app. Auto owners pays what they owe without any hassle.
Lucky for you, that's simple human sense.
Ask your independent agent if auto owners make sense for you.
Here's a real-life story that affects 50% of all of us out there. It's called divorce. If you've gotten divorced and now you're struggling to pay your bills and your credit card debts are completely out of control, you need to call this special debt relief hotline right now. We help people with all kinds of money problems caused by different life challenges, a divorce, a job loss, even heavy medical bills. All these life events can sometimes financially stress you out and cause you to get out of control. We help people get their lives back by showing them ways to consolidate and reduce their debt, in some cases for a fraction of what they owe. If your credit card balances are more than $10,000, call us and learn how to reduce your credit card bills and monthly payments now. Here's our number.
Paid for by Debt.com. Call now, 800-810-1584, 800-810-1584, 800-810-1584. That's 800-810-1584.
That ought to do it. Totally energy efficient.
Oh, no, not again. This time, we're getting help.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the battle of energy efficiency improvements. In this corner, Mr. I can save money and do it on my own. And in this corner, Miss Let's Get It Done Right with some help. Fight! Or you could just go to avoidenergydrama.com. From sealing your home to helpful loan options, you'll find all the tips and tools you need to stop wasting energy and stay comfortable. Avoidenergydrama.com. Brought to you by Michigan Saves.
We'll be back with more in a moment. This is The Sports Life.
Unlike other health concerns, mental illness is not always easy to see. Depression won't show up on an eye chart, and you can't measure it on your bathroom scale. Sorting out a mental health concern is not something to attempt on your own. You won't find a bipolar disorder by looking at a thermometer. Like many other health conditions, help for mental illness takes professional diagnosis and treatment. Anxiety won't just go away under a stick-on bandage. So the sooner you seek treatment, the better. If you or a loved one has a mental health concern, don't go it alone. find out what to do. For 24-hour free and confidential information and treatment referral, call 1-800-662-HELP. Learn more at samhsa.gov/support. That's samhsa.gov/support.
And welcome back for more of the Sports Life. Will Teeman here along with Dalton Shetler. And don't forget, Auto Owners Insurance, simple human sense. Ask your independent agent if Auto Owners make sense for you. Well, we've been talking hoops on the Sports Life this week, and we're going to continue to do that. Ohio State bound out of the Big Ten tournament with a tough loss to Iowa in their first game. So the question is, how did Jake Diebler and staff do in year one? Well, to help us sort that out, we've invited Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch to join us. So, Adam, welcome to the show, and how do you think they did?
Well, ultimately, the goal, there were many goals for this season, but a lot of them hinged on get to the NCAA tournament. And they put themselves in a position where they were very much in the running for that right up until when that final buzzer sounded against Iowa. So ultimately, I think most of the goals that this team set out this season, they're going to fall short of. They're not coming home with any sort of hardware. They're not going to play in the NCAA tournament. So in that aspect, the whole year comes up short. There were some highlights. There were some good moments. You saw some young players step into some bigger roles. But, as I sit here and try to evaluate the balance of the season, I find myself it came up lacking a bit. And there's some significant room, I think, for growth, and there's opportunity for growth as they move into year two.
Taking the framework that you just laid out there, Adam, I kind of want to ask you, because there was a lot of talk during the offseason about some of the talent acclamation that Ohio State and Jake Diebler are putting together, where they bring in Aaron Bradshaw, they bring back Meechie Johnson. What was it that didn't quite click all the way for Ohio State this season?
Well, a lot of it is the front court. It just they had no inside presence of any kind of consistent nature, really. At any point this season. Their best post player was Devin Royal, who I think is a growing star in the league, and I think had a really solid sophomore season. I think ideally next year you would think about him being more a 3 than a 4. But like Sean Stewart and Aaron Bradshaw, both of them sophomores, both of them coming from blue blood programs, and both of them stepping into bigger roles than they had last season. And I thought Stewart showed a couple of things. In Big Ten play, he led the league in defensive rebounding percentage. He was 8th or 9th in offensive rebounding percentage. You saw some flashes there of some real ability. He's a tough guy. He gets rebounds in traffic. He's got to work on his offensive game and his free throw shooting. He was 0 for 4 last night. But Aaron Bradshaw never materialized in anything, and he had a stretch in the beginning of the season where he wasn't allowed to be with the team due to a university investigation. And then he got sick later in the year. It never clicked for him this season, and that front court became a donut. And to me, that's a huge factor in where the season ended up, because they had to be so perimeter reliant. And then when you do look at the perimeter, Meechie Johnson left the team after 10 games. Still hasn't explained why, other than to say it's an absence for personal reasons. But so much of this team was geared around Bruce Thornton and Meechie Johnson in that backcourt, and then Meechie leaves after 10 games, and you have to play a John Mobley Jr., who's a freshman and very talented, who had a really solid year, but he goes from playing maybe 15 minutes a game, 18 minutes a game to 30. And Quez Glover goes from, having not played at all last year due to injury to an important rotation player. That just those I think Meechie and Bradshaw and the way their seasons turned out significantly hamstrung where this team could get.
Well, and given that, and those were the two that we mentioned that brought a lot of attention during the offseason before the season ever started, you kind of don't have those pieces like you expected throughout the course of the season. Adam, let me ask you, even though Ohio State looks like they're not going to be part of the NCAA tournament, they could be in the NIT if they choose to accept an offer. If we evaluate Jake Diebler's job in year one as the full-time guy, given that he didn't have those two big pieces the way you expect, was this a decent job by Jake?
I think so, because I think about when this was all assembled, and I think about that time period where he gets the job. The portal is open. He's hiring an entirely new coaching staff and also trying to build an entirely new roster. And it was a significant challenge for anybody, certainly, much less a first-year coach. And so to navigate what they've had to navigate this year and still be in position, like Ohio State fans don't want to hear it because they've missed the tournament the last 2 years, and I think there's a growing sense of impatience in the fan base. But given everything they had to deal with this season, like he had no way of knowing Michie Johnson was going to leave after 10 games. He had no way of knowing that Aaron Bradshaw was going to be suspended early in the season and miss a month of growth and development. Like, there are some things that were out of his control. And I do think, to his credit, he had this team playing hard. And I do think they played with a toughness for much of the year that maybe hadn't always been there the last couple. So I do think there's certainly some credit to be given there for sure. I think there's just a sense of frustration that it wasn't enough to get this team where it ultimately wanted to be, and that's playing in March Madness.
I think, Adam, all of us, when we go into a second year of any job we have, we get a little smarter, maybe. So what do you think Jake Diebler learned from year one that will help him in year two?
I think when you go in the portal this year, you look more for production than potential, because you were asking a couple of sophomores to step into much bigger roles as compared to their freshman seasons. And you were essentially taking a flyer on most of your front court, assuming that Bradshaw and Stewart would develop and become consistent guys. And that didn't really happen. Quez Glover was a depth addition in the portal, and, what really struggled in my eyes for much of the season. You were taking some guys based on the belief that there was better basketball ahead of them. And ultimately, you got nothing really from your front court. So I think you have to go into this offseason and look at that transfer portal and say, okay, where are our two biggest needs? And I think you need to hit them hard. And I think if they can bring in some guys who can contribute right away, and you're not hoping they grow into something, but they're proven and they're guys that you can rely on, I think that's probably the biggest adjustment that if I were on that coaching staff, that I would try to make for a second year. Well, as always, Adam, we appreciate it. And so I guess maybe it's have a good off season. We'll see. They might be playing in this college basketball crown event, which I have a whole slew of questions about as well. So I don't know if the off season is here just yet, but it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. I appreciate you guys having me. Okay. Thank you so much, Adam. Sure. So there you go, some insight from Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. Well, when we come back with more of the Sports Life, our hoops conversations will continue. This time we're going to talk about the women of UCLA in their run to what might be a national championship. It's all coming up in just a moment.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Dad. Did you get a new haircut or something? A new shirt? You're looking good.
What happened?
A little fender bender?
How little?
A few days in the shop little, but thanks to Mom and our agent, we've already submitted a claim and can track the status right from the app. Auto Owners pays what they owe without any hassle.
Sounds like simple human sense.
I'm fine, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask.
Ask your independent agent if Auto Owners makes sense for you.
So I graduated last year and got a job. Sweet! But it got boring. I didn't really have a purpose. Then I started volunteering with Community Action. It's a statewide network with 29 agencies across Michigan. Community Action helps people with food, housing, utilities, childcare, senior services, you name it. I found my purpose, helping people, changing lives. Won't you join me? Call 1-855-MI-ACTION or go to MichiganCommunityAction.org. Sponsored by Michigan Community Action and Michigan Association of Broadcasters.
This is a potter's field. When people can't pay for their funerals, they are buried here. It is a lonely, desolate place, littered with unmarked headstones. No one visits. No one leaves flowers. But it doesn't have to be that way. For as low as $1 a day, you can ensure your family will have the money to pay your funeral expenses. We offer burial insurance plans that pay up to $30,000. Considering the average funeral costs more than $10,000, that's peace of mind for your family. There are no medical exams, your rates won't increase, and your policy cannot be canceled as long as you make your premium payments. Call now to get approved in minutes and ensure your final resting place is more than just a pauper's grave in a potter's field.
800-562-2407. 800-562-2407. 800-562-2407. That's 800-562-2407. Paid for by Final Expense Direct.
We'll be back with more in a moment. This is The Sports Life.
We all make choices. When it comes to alcohol, kids make choices whether to drink or not.
Bye, Dad.
Bye-bye.
Remember, I'm going to Alex's party tonight and sleeping over.
Hey, have a seat for a second. Remind me about that party again?
Alex is just...
And adults make choices whether to talk about it. That's true of parents and every other trusted adult in a kid's life. Kids want to know our expectations when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. They want guidance and honest answers to their questions. And it makes a difference when the message is consistent and part of everyday conversations. So talk with your kids and help lead them on a positive path. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
And welcome back for more of the Sports Life. We'll team in here along with Dalton Shetler. Well, when you talk about Big Ten women's basketball, there are two teams that stand out as being kind of the head of the class. And one of those right now is UCLA. They are ranked number 1 in the nation. They only lost 2 games all year. And both games came to Southern Cal. Thus, the Trojans became the regular season champs. But the Bruins redeemed themselves by winning the Big Ten tournament. They are an amazing basketball team, and the fellow who has been the voice of UCLA women's basketball for 22 seasons now is Dave Marcus. And Dave, thanks for joining us. And before we talk about how good this Bruin team is and postseason play, can you give us your take on what it's been like to join the Big Ten this season?
Well, gentlemen, nice to speak with you, and it's a pleasure. It was really an interesting season in the Big Ten. It was great for me. I haven't been to some of the places that we went this year. It was interesting for the coaches, too. Not only the travel aspect, which was real, but also having 29 separate teams to scout, considering our non-conference and our conference schedule. You know, the big conference, you only play one team twice, and for the Bruins, it happened to be USC. But it was a very exciting season, and what an incredible championship game, the Bruins and the Trojans. Schools that are 11 miles apart went 1,900 miles each to play that game.
It really is kind of amazing, Dave, when you think about that. And, you know, I think a lot of casual fans, when they do word affiliation or name affiliation, they hear UCLA, they think Pauley Pavilion, John Wood, and all the success. But, Dave, I don't know if a lot of people know that on the women's side, what you're experiencing this year is not necessarily the norm. This is a really unique and, in some ways, unprecedented season you're explaining. I was curious if you could explain what the ride has been like to be this dominant all year long.
They have simply the deepest, most talented team they've ever had. But UCLA's had some very good teams in the past. They went to the Pac-12 tournament finals the last 4 times without a win. And last year they played USC in the Pac-12 semifinals and lost the game in double overtime. So this was a really important win for UCLA, not only to hoist a trophy, but also psychologically to win in the most pressure-packed of surroundings. But the Bruins have always had good players. There are players in the WNBA now, Jordan Kennedy Burke, Michaela Onyenwere, Monique Billings. They've had really talented teams. But this is maybe the first time they've had outstanding post presence and outstanding guard play. And it's been a really wonderful ride. This team now together, a lot of the junior class came in as the top class in the country a couple of years ago, and they have really matured and developed. A couple of transfer additions, Tamia Gardner from Oregon State, Janiyah Barker from Texas A&M, really key to the team's success. And the freshman point guard from Finland, Alina Arnisalo, who started the first game of the season in Paris on national TV when Kiki Rice was out with a shoulder injury. She's been just great for them. They have really been a very poised and resilient group all year.
Well, Dave, you're ranked number one in the country. You've only lost 2 games all season. Ironically enough, it was the guy, 11 miles away. But at the end of the day, when you look at this team, is this team good enough to win the whole thing?
I definitely think they are. And I remember talking to people before the season started and telling them that I thought UCLA was a legitimate national championship contender. And early in the year, South Carolina came to Pauley Pavilion, and that was a real test for UCLA. They had lost to South Carolina a couple times a couple of years ago, and the Bruins led that game at halftime 43-22. They just swarmed them, and they held them to 36% shooting. And if you look at the Bruins team, everybody talks about Lauren Betts, who is one of the most incredible players in the country, the big post presence. But the Bruins defense has been phenomenal all year long. They held teams to an average of 35% from the floor. USC shot 34% in the championship game. So the Bruins defense, I think, has the legs to really carry them very far in the NCAA tournament.
Well, Dave, I had 2 other questions I was going to ask you. One, if you got to pick what's been more impressive, the offense or defense for UCLA, where do you lean if you have to pick one?
Ask me which day it is. The offense has been spectacular at times. They've struggled a little bit in the latter half of the season. They were averaging 85 points a game for a long time. So, this Big Ten tournament was really important. They played a good game against Nebraska. The defense was shining in that one. Then they wiped out Ohio State, a 30-point win, and we hadn't had one of those for a long time. And then the defense against SC, especially defending Juju Watkins. I know she still got 29 points, but they really held her down. They threw so many different defensive looks at the Trojans. They had a box and one. They had, different kinds of swarm coverage. They really mixed it up. And I think that the defense is really what has got defense and rebounding has been the key for UCLA all year, although they did get out rebounded by SC, but didn't get hurt on the offensive rebounds. So it's been an probably overlooked portion of the Bruins' success is how defensively locked down they are.
Dave, I kind of want to illustrate for maybe some of the listeners that are just parachuting in here at the end for the NCAA tournament, and they're wanting to tune in some of these games. They haven't been watching UCLA all year. I make the comparison all the time that it's like Purdue men's basketball when they had Zach Edey. I mean, you have a dominant force inside with Lauren Betts. You surround it with a Dugalich, a Gardner, a Jaquez, so on and so forth, and a great ball handler in Kiki Rice. That's kind of the play style. Do you agree with that? And how much further would you take that?
I agree 100% with that, Dalton. And early in the year, they were whipping the ball around into the post, back out, into the post, and the three-point shooters were hitting. In the middle of the Big Ten schedule when, again, the travel wasn't that easy, the three-point shots weren't always going in. And Lauren Betts, at some points, I think, was trying to do it all herself. They've gotten back to the sharing the ball kind of play. And, they were fantastic against USC, 8 threes in 15 tries. I mean, the day before that against Ohio State, London Jones herself made 6 out of 12. And it was a lot of inside-out action. So when that's working well, the Bruins are really potent.
So, Dave, when I mentioned 22 years covering this UCLA women's basketball program, can you give us a rough idea of the growth you've seen? Because you've watched the evolution of a sport that has really come front and center.
It's always been an exciting sport. It's always been fun to cover UCLA women's basketball. But the biggest evolution is the fan involvement. UCLA, a great tradition of basketball. The men always were predominant. The women won the AIAW championship back in 1978, the great Ann Myers, Denise Curry teams. But I think the fan involvement has been growing over the years. UCLA went to an Elite Eight in I'm trying to think back exactly when
2018,
it was.
I believe,
the
Dave?
Jordan Canada. Yeah, I think it was. It was the Jordan Canada Monique Billings team. And that team had a core group of loyal followers, and that group has just grown and grown and grown. And a year ago, they sold the game out at home against USC. That was a win. And then in the NCAA tournament, they had almost 10,000 there for a really tough second-round game against Creighton. And this year, I mean, they've played in front of 4 or 5 sellouts, around the country. Pauley Pavilion sold out for the South Carolina, the SC games. The community has grown. So has the product gotten incrementally better? Yes. But the fan involvement is really what's making the difference now. UCLA women's basketball is not under the radar anymore. And that's been the most gratifying thing for me, to see these players and coaches get rewarded for all their hard efforts. It's a great group of people, and I'm happy to see them getting the attention they deserve.
Well, Dave Marcus, it's so great to visit with you, and I hope you guys have a great tournament run.
Well, Will, I appreciate it. We're looking forward to it. It'll be interesting to see where the Bruins get seated. We've got all the net numbers and the quad one wins and what Dorita Dawkins, the chair of the selection committee, called the observable component. You and I would call that the eye test. And I think the Bruins stack up pretty well on all those criteria.
Well, I don't care what they say about the quads and the nets and all that. I just think UCLA is a great team, and when you have a great team, you got a chance to win it.
Well, we appreciate it. Pleasure visiting with you.
Fun conversation with Dave Marcus, a longtime voice of the UCLA women's basketball team. Dalton, can you believe as good as they have been? You got to go back to Ann Meyer for a national championship team?
That's amazing. In the non-AIAW days, since the NCAA tournament for the women, you only have 2 Elite Eights for a proud program in UCLA. That could make this year pretty special. Could be their first Final Four, which is insane.
Well, and I also thought what he said was so insightful. It's about the fan involvement. That has been the biggest growth in his over 2 decades of covering them and women's basketball. Unbelievable. Well, when we come back talking about unbelievable, our parting shots. But first, a break right here on the Sports Life.
So, got one for you, boss.
Oh, yeah?
What's black, white, and dented all over?
I give up.
The company truck. I know, but thanks to our agent, we've already submitted an insurance claim and can track the status right from the app. Auto owners pays what they owe without any hassle.
Lucky for you, that's simple human sense.
Ask your independent agent if auto owners make sense for you.
So I graduated last year and got a job. Sweet! But it got boring. I didn't really have a purpose. Then I started volunteering with Community Action. It's a statewide network with 29 agencies across Michigan. Community Action helps people with food, housing, utilities, childcare, senior services, you name it. I found my purpose, helping people, changing lives. Won't you join me? Call 1-855-MI-ACTION or go to MichiganCommunityAction.org. Sponsored by Michigan Community Action and Michigan Association of Broadcasters.
If you have diabetes, listen up. If you have insurance, you can qualify for a continuous glucose monitor. With a CGM, you can continuously track your levels and trends and spend more time in range, significantly lowering your A1C. More importantly, a CGM eliminates the one thing most people with diabetes hate: painful finger sticks. Order your new continuous glucose monitor today. If you use insulin and if you've seen your diabetes care provider within the last 6 months, you may qualify for your own CGM right now. We'll do all the insurance paperwork and deliver your new CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost to you. Medicare and most insurances will cover your CGM, so don't wait. Have your insurance handy and call the Aptiva Medical CGM Health Hotline right now.
800-948-6912. 800-948-6912. 800-948-6912. That's 800-948-6912.
We'll be back with more in a moment. This is The Sports Life.
Anybody ready for a burger?
I'm State Fire Marshal Rich Miller, reminding everyone to think safety first when it comes to outdoor grilling, whether it's charcoal or gas. Never overload your grill with food. Excess fat and grease will create large flames. Grill outdoors and never inside or in a garage. Never leave a grill unattended and always keep a fire extinguisher nearby. For more tips on safe grilling, visit the Bureau of Fire Services website at michigan.gov/BFS.
Medicaid and CHIP offer free or low-cost health coverage for children and teens. Hospital and doctor visits, prescriptions, shots, and more are covered. That's peace of mind for parents if a child is sick or gets injured. And parents may now be eligible for Medicaid too, even if they've applied in the past. Enrollment is always open. Visit InsureKidsNow.gov or call 1-877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
And welcome back from Other Sports Life. Will Teeman here along with Dalton Shetler. Good show. Got a little insight on some of the basketball programs. And for me, it was hard to imagine that UCLA on the women's side had not won anything since Ann Meyer. I still can't get over that one.
It's crazy. Just crazy.
Well, speaking of crazy, it's now time for the parting shots.
Well, and I'll tell you something I think is a little bit crazy with my parting shot. After I first remind you that, give us a follow on Twitter or X, whatever you call it. We're at Sports Life Now. That's, again, at Sports Life Now. But something I found a little bit crazy, and, of course, this is just my opinion, so everybody can feel free to disagree with it if they so choose. But news broke here in the last couple of days that Minnesota men's basketball has decided to part ways with head coach Ben Johnson, finishing his 4th season there in Minneapolis. And look, I'm somebody who's going to throw a lot of stats at you to prove the point, the opinion that I have. This one, I'm just going to go off eye and gut test. That program succeeded about as well as I thought it could under Ben Johnson. I don't know how much higher that program can go with the resources available for a head coach in the NIL landscape, the revenue sharing potential market that is a door that might open up. Ben Johnson is an alum who I thought really carried himself with class, made that program and the fans proud in a lot of different ways throughout multiple instances. And to see him in the middle of the night be released from Minnesota was really a difficult pill to swallow, I think, for a lot of Big Ten fans.
And just to add to that, if they had given him resources and he could have kept his team together from the season before, we're not even having this conversation.
Absolutely. So you agree with me. It's not crazy.
There's two of us. Yay. So it's not crazy. Okay, I'm going to make fun of myself a little bit because Dalton Shetler has heard me say on the men's side of basketball in the Big Ten, once we got the gist of this new Big Ten and the travel, I said to Dalton, there is no way the 4 new members will ever win a regular season Big Ten basketball championship because travel alone will nail them for a couple losses. Well, what I'm going to add is there's an exception. The exception is unless you're as good as the women at UCLA and the women at Southern Cal.
That's fair. That's a good exception.
There you go. So with that, that's a wrap for this week's show. And we should also note that you can find us wherever you find your podcast, like SoundCloud, Spotify, and Apple. And make sure to check us out and hit subscribe. As always, thanks to the Big Ten Network. The Sports Life is produced by Dalton Shetler and assisted by Owen Cronin. Our executive producer is Wendy Hart. So on behalf of Dalton Shetler, I'm Will Teeman, and thanks for your time.